Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronenbaum. And joining us tonight is Ron Caniff and Chris Duke Early. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about. The draft has just finished, and that's exactly what we're going to discuss. The draft is over. We're going to recap everybody, all the players that were picked up, all the players that we wish that would have been picked up. And basically, we're going to give actually some quick grades over what we thought the draft was. Are we going to give it an A? Are we going to give it an F? Or are we more than likely going to give it something in between? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So first things first, I want to just make sure we get this out of the way right before we really get going. I need everybody to know exactly what it is that my draft philosophy has always been. Now, I will readily admit that I am not an expert on the draft by any means. I'm not good at watching draft prospect film. I don't have that kind of time to dedicate to checking out everybody like, say, an Eden Wharton does. And by the way, his draft guide was phenomenal, and you can still get it, I think, for a discount at this point if you want to check it out. You might want to check his Twitter for information on that. I could be wrong on the discount, but it's still awesome for the price that it is. Little plug right there for Ian. But in any case, when I look at the draft, I am always looking at it as a situation where you have to balance need with best player available. Now, obviously, there are a lot of people who are always screaming about best player available. You always take the best player available. It doesn't matter. It does not matter who or what that position is. You always have to make sure that it's the best player that is on the board. And of course, everybody has their own personal opinions over who the best player is, which is what brings me to my next point. Ironically enough, I am seeing a lot of people who are actually pretty pleased with how the Dolphins approached the draft this year. The 2017 draft had the Dolphins picking a defensive end in the first round and then a linebacker in the second. You got your cornerback in the third and a guard in the fourth, then two DTs and a wide receiver. So all in all, while the last one is pretty much a best player available type of pick, which in the seventh round, I guess it really doesn't matter anymore. But for all intents and purposes, and this is what really makes it ironic to me, is that all these people who were screaming that it had to be the best player available no matter what are actually liking a draft where it appears the Dolphins drafted for need. They really did. They drafted for need. And if Chris Grier tells you that, oh, that just happened to be the best player available on the board, then, I mean, good for you if you're telling the truth. I personally have some skepticism because it seemed to me that every single issue that the Dolphins had, they took care of it. They needed a defensive end because the depth there was bad with William Hayes only and Andre Branch, who not everybody's convinced he can make a repeat of what happened last season. You have a linebacker, which obviously the Dolphins have been struggling there for a long time, which is what led to the Dolphins investing in Kiko Alonso last year, what it led them to investing in Lawrence Timmons now to ideally be the middle linebacker while Kiko gets bumped to the outside. I personally would have liked to see Kiko stay in the inside because I think he was pretty good there, but that's another story. So Rayquan McMillan will probably be the strong side linebacker now. You have a guard who will finally be able to give Jay Ajayi some running room in the left guard position. You have a lot of stuff going on. Defensive tackle is going to make sure that Jordan Phillips won't be able to just sit back on his laurels and just wait for his starting job to come back to him. He's actually going to have to fight for it now. And, of course, Isaiah Ford, who, while he's not somebody that's going to have to get an easy job, he might just make the roster just because Jakeem Grant hasn't been exactly what we had hoped for with his big personality. Little man, big personality, not a whole lot of production. That does not bode well for him. So, me personally, I'm still rooting for Grant because of how much I like him, but Isaiah Ford has a really good shot at taking that roster spot. So, all in all, my point is this was a need-based draft if you look at it on paper, and I couldn't be happier. And that's what I find funny is that most of the BPA people are also happy with the draft, despite the fact that if you look at it on paper, it was a need draft. So that's what I just really wanted to get out there. Now I'm going to open up the floor to you guys. I'll go ahead and start with you, Ron. Let's get your impressions on the draft overall, and then we'll start going prospect by prospect.
Overall, I really liked the philosophy. I liked where they went. You and I did a show last year heading into last year's draft, and I was really hoping that last year they would go super heavy on defense. I wanted 2 years heavy of defense because I felt like if you do it for 2 straight years, that you've really got a good chance to find 3, 4, 5 just guys that are just gold, and it could set your defense up for 5, 6, 7 years. But they didn't. They went a different way. and they've kind of boxed themselves in a corner and forced themselves to go heavy defense this year with some of the picks and trades they made last year, and that's just the honest truth. As far as the draft went, they really gave themselves no choice. I mean, as far as a linebacker goes, for instance, yeah, they added a linebacker through free agency, and Kiko was a nice addition. He was a nice surprise for us. But this team had drafted 2 linebackers in 4 years, and neither one of them were even on the team in Jordan Tripp and Jelani Jenkins. They really had to get a young linebacker, maybe even another guy. They picked up Chris Allen, who seems like that might be a little nice addition that they picked up as an undrafted free agent. He may even have a shot to make the team. They kept on adding just undrafted free agents in the past and not drafting linebackers, so they had to do that. We kept just kind of picking up Band-Aids at defensive end, and one of those worked in Andre Branch, but they really weren't drafting a lot of defensive ends, or they were doing it super late in the draft previously, and as in Fide. So they put themselves in a situation where they needed desperately to add young talent to this defense. But they went and did it. They went and addressed their needs, and I like teams that address needs. If you have a guy in front of you who's just oh my God, I can't believe this guy's here, we have to draft him, as in Tunzel like last year, then you do it. But beyond that, you stick to your board, you stick to what you need to do in the draft, and it just feels like the Dolphins did that this year, and I'm very happy with how it ended up.
All right, now how about you, Chad? Let's get your impressions.
Overall, I liked the draft. I understood a lot of the picks. Going back to your philosophy, though, Lewis, I understand a lot of people talk about best player available, and then also trying to mesh that with what your needs are. But I'm a big believer that as a football team, not just for the upcoming season, but to have sustainable success, you've got to pair young players with proven veterans and develop them. And I like that. I've been kind of seeing that, with Gase. So, you bring in a defensive end, and a lot of people were upset because he is not an every down player, but he's a very accomplished pass rusher already. They're going to be able to allow him to rush the passer on day one, and he gets to learn from Cameron Wake. That's a very good pairing. McMillan's going to get to learn from Komisi. And so I think it's really important with young players that even first-round picks and second-round picks, to bring them into a system like the NFL where everybody's good, and the amount of preparation, both physically and mentally, that goes into it, it's a lot to put on a rookie's shoulder to expect them to walk in day one on training camp and be the starter. And I don't see Miami putting any of these guys in a position where they're going to have to be the starter on day one, but they have the skill sets to immediately benefit the team. Obviously, they got a good pass rusher. They've got a guy that can play strong side linebacker and a guy that can play middle linebacker. They've got their prototypical boundary corner that can learn from Byron Maxwell. And so you can kind of see not just them filling needs this year, but you can see them maybe actually putting together a sustainable process where players that are picked in the third round and fourth round are going to be contributors to the team. And we're kind of getting away from this cycle we had in the Ireland years where maybe 1 or 2 year draft picks stick around, and after 3 or 4 years, they're all gone because they never were even given the chance to learn from a proven veteran and properly coached. So I really feel like the draft was both long-term and short-term together. I liked how they mixed that, and it made a lot of sense to me. The players they picked, I didn't notice them taking any substantial reaches. I thought they got very good value where they took the players at. And, I think the biggest polarizing pick of the draft was McMillan because a lot of the analysts were rough on the pick, but I don't think they realized that, he's probably going to be replacing Komisi in the near term. Possibly he'll be a middle linebacker in the long term. And they keep acting like he's going to be covering a lot of tight ends in man coverage and stuff when they're describing this guy. And so I think he's exactly what Miami needed. We've been struggling with the running game, and this guy's a very sound tackler. I watched the film on him, and you look at his technique, he's a very good tackler. And so I know there's a lot of debate on whether we should have took Cunningham or should we have taken Foster, but I believe Miami got a good, fundamentally sound football player that fits their system.
And finally, Duke, your general impressions before we start going prospect by prospect.
I thought it was a good draft. I like what they did. I liked that there wasn't a lot of movement. There wasn't a lot of, silly stuff going on like you saw with Chicago and Buffalo and some of this other stuff. They just stuck to the board. And as I told you guys pre-show that I mentioned that a blurb I heard from Brian Billick a couple of years ago on the Combine coverage. He said, most teams will say they draft. He said, we're in Baltimore, we draft the best player available. It also just happened that the best player available happened to fit a need. So I think that Miami did a great job of marrying the player they wanted to fit the need they wanted, and that happened to be the best player that they wanted. I'm not a big fan of the term reach because we don't really know how the Dolphins how they've made their board compared to, whatever board that I happen to be using or you happen to be using. But I think they got players that were expected to go, that went where they were expected to go, maybe even lower than they were expected to go, which is always good. If you can get a player, for example, Tankersley in the third round, I mean, he had, according to NFL.com, he had a higher grade on him than Xavier Howard last year, who was the 6th or 8th pick or something in the second round, and they got him at pick 97. So they were able to find a guy that they targeted, that they really liked, who still had a high grade. They got him deep into the draft, which is always good. I liked what they did. They were the last team in this year's draft to pick an offensive player, which is kind of cool. And it's also, and I think Adam Beasley tweeted after the pick that Miami has drafted an offensive lineman in every draft since they've been around. I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, and considering the woes that the offensive line has had, it's no surprise really. So we've been consistently drafting offensive linemen. Not many of them have panned out. Hopefully, Isaac Asiata actually does pan out for once. So now we're gonna go ahead and get into prospect by prospect, and we're gonna go, of course, in order of the players that were picked. Now, I'm sure that if you checked out my Twitter and you were checking out my live draft coverage at the draft party at Hard Rock Stadium, you were able to see exactly what the reactions were of the fans who were there as they were watching the draft unfold. They were seeing Reuben Foster, of course, start to fall and all the way to the point where it got to 22. You saw a live video of me recording the reaction as it came. Everybody was screaming Reuben Foster, just chanting his name as loud as they could because they wanted that superstar potential linebacker on the Dolphins. So
did I.
Yeah, I did too, man. I'll be the first to admit it. I wanted Reuben Foster in there while he was there too, but it was a dream come true, to be perfectly honest, and I was hoping that it would happen, but I refuse to spoil anything. But it's like while I was doing the Periscope, I saw comments popping up on the screen that were saying Charles Harris, and I just thought to myself, oh my God, they didn't pick Foster, did they? And I for one, I kept a straight face because I was the one who had to be recording, and I couldn't let the fans get an indication that something was horribly, horribly wrong. So then the pick was announced, and you just saw everybody's faces fall. It was like devastation had come down upon the Dolphins fan base all in one go, and only the truest and bluest of fans were able to recover from the hit and start to clap for Charles Harris because they just felt heartbroken that the Dolphins had passed on Reuben Foster for a guy that, as far as I know, was not even invited to the draft in Philadelphia. So, which ironically enough, I'm starting to notice that more and more. Have you guys noticed that for the last few years, the Dolphins have drafted players who were actually not invited to the draft? Because remember when Jawan James was drafted, he wasn't actually there either. Because nobody pictured that he would even go in the first round.
Well, yes, I mean they're not invited because teams, maybe the NFL has decided they're not 100% sure they're going to go in the first round, and I know it's tough on the kids to be there and not get picked. I mean, we've all seen the free falls like the Geno Smiths and the Brady Quinns and stuff. When they start free falling, then it's almost like a nightmare because all the cameras are on them and they're not.
Aaron
really
Rodgers.
Yeah, exactly. Throw that one in there, but for a kid that's that age, that's tough when you're not used to all the media all over you, and then suddenly it's like you're failing and you haven't even failed yet. So I understand why they limit the number of people they bring there.
Yeah.
To it.
So, yeah, anyway, Charles Harris, a defensive end out of Missouri. According to Matthew Knowles, who does the film reviews for PhinManiacs, he didn't test too well. And he actually did not, as far as I know, he didn't actually do any testing. Let me see here. I'm actually trying to read his scouting report here. He did much better in his pro day than he did at the combine, Charles Harris did. So there was he was able to prove that he does have some footwork and strength and stuff like that. But as far as we know, Charles Harris is an excellent pass rusher. He is something of a liability in the run game. And if we're going to go top tier potential comparison, ironically enough, that comparison is Cameron Wake. I don't think he's as explosive as Wake. I don't think he has the right measurables to match Wake. But if he can get his technique down and stay under Cameron Wake's wing, which is what he said that he's willing to do, then he could potentially become the next Cam Wake, as Cameron Wake is now 35 years old and he'll be going on 36 very soon. So we needed to get a new Cameron Wake soon. So let's get some thoughts on Charles Harris in particular.
That's one thing that, several people on Twitter mentioned, and I don't think some fans realize. First of all, and Lewis, we've talked about linebackers a lot. That was the biggest need that I saw, and I was a fan of Foster.
Mm-hmm.
But I also understood that if he fell as far as he did, there was a reason why. And so it's not like that, this wasn't a Tunsil case where it's just this one video that popped up. You didn't have this history going on. It wasn't an injury deal. This was something bigger. And so and Adam Gase has connections with Saban. A lot of the guys in the NFL do, but he was close to Saban. So if he got that info, the team got that info, and they were willing to pass on it. And word was now that Taco Charlton was the guy that if Harris wasn't there, that they were going to take. So Foster wasn't even the fallback option. But anyway, here defensive end was a big need. We have Andre Branch. He's the only guy on the team that works in the regular rotation or a start that's under 30. Terrence Fede does, but he's right now, he's nothing but a backup. He's not shown that he can be more than that. You've got Cameron Wake, who, as far as I'm concerned, is a cyborg. But at some point, you've got to wonder when A's is going to catch up with him. And then you've got Hayes, who they traded for, and he's over 30.
And he's a run stopper. He's not going to get to the QB.
So you needed someone to be an understudy. It was a need. And we talked about this a couple of years ago on the offensive line. I think it was actually back in 2015. We talked about how offensive tackle was a need because of Brandon Albert's health, his durability, and his age. And Miami was able to get Larry Tunsil last year to take over, or to be that understudy and take over when the time came, which is this year. So that's what they do with Harris. So I've actually got what I wrote up on him, and I watched some tape of him last night. The first thing I look for with an edge rusher is the get off, his first step. If you watch Cameron Wake, who he's a prototypical speed rusher, you watch his first step. He is always one of the first off the line of scrimmage, and he's quick into the backfield. He's so quick. There was a game a couple of years ago, I think it might have been the game that they won where Michael Thomas got that interception, that they were playing against the Patriots. They snapped the ball, so it was a false start. But you could tell right as they snapped the ball, he was already 2 steps into the backfield before the left tackle was even standing, or the right tackle was even standing up. That's how quick he is. And Charles Harris has that get off. So while he may be undersized, while he may have some, that stuff for the run game, he's always going to have that advantage of being able to get quick off the snap. Despite his testing numbers, he's quick off the snap. That's always going to give tackles trouble. That's the reason why I wasn't big on Olivier Vernon. You watch Olivier Vernon, he's not the first guy off the ball. He never was. He's relentless. He's going to try to get there, but he was just never that first guy. And Harris is going to be like that. Harris has a good motor. He does not take plays off. The guy he's an energizer bunny. He keeps going and going, even when teams, Missouri's defense wasn't very good. That was who they focused on, and so he just kept going. He didn't get what you got from Jordan Phillips, where you get that one great play, and there's a couple of plays where he just kind of mail into the end. He's always giving it 100%. To use one of the Mike Mayock terms, he can flatten and bend. He's not just a straight line guy. He's not just going to run fast. That was one thing, I was a fan of Jordan Willis, but one of the knocks on him was, could he bend? Could he get, he had the good numbers, but could he actually get low and bend and get around the quarterback? And that's something Harris can do. Again, Cameron Wake is what you look for in that. Look how he can get around. He can dip the edge and get back around. He struggles against the run because he's a little bit undersized. But, from what I watched with Harris is that I think it was mostly there was a lot of gap stuff. He would get through his gap, but the rest of the defense wasn't there to help out. So, as Dolphins fans, we're used to seeing that where one guy does his job, but then the second line of defense or whatever else doesn't do their job, and then, a big play happens.
Welcome to Miami.
Yeah, so I watched some plays from that last night, and, there was a couple times where there was one game I watched against West Virginia where he set the edge. It was a zone run for the running back, and it looked like the corner was not even in the picture. And if Harris had been blocked out of that, the running back just he goes around the left tackle, and he probably picks up 20 yards before anybody touches him. But Harris was able to close it off and force him back inside. Now, the running back got like 12 or 15 yards out of it because the defensive tackle got washed completely off the line, and the linebackers missed tackles. So, again, we're used to seeing that as Dolphins fans. But what Harris did, he maintained that position and held up and forced the running back to take another lane, which, if he does that against the Dolphins and Alonzo and McMillan or whoever else, Timmons comes in and makes a stop there, then that's good run defense. You don't always have to make the tackle. So, yeah, he's got his flaws, but, to me, the traits that he has rushing the passer is more than enough to make him not only worthy of that pick, but a very good pick.
All right, Chad?
Well, I think, again, people are upset because he's not a every down player, and he's absolutely not. I would be surprised if he doesn't struggle against the run because this is going to be a whole new level of competition for him. I've watched a fair amount of film on him the last couple of days, and he is very quick off the ball. I would say pretty confidently he's going to be the second best pass rusher on our team, secondary to Wake. I don't really see him as a Cameron Wake type player. Cameron Wake is just a freak of nature. He's just so fast off the ball, and he's the ability to use his strength in his movement with a continuous progression towards the quarterback. I've just never really seen anybody like Cameron Wake. But
when I compared him to Wake, it wasn't to say that Harris is Wake. I'm just that they have similar traits.
But
like his bend, his speed, and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And he absolutely is the heir apparent to Cameron Wake. His job is going to be to take Cameron Wake's role as the primary pass rusher on the team. Now, and this is not I'm saying that he's going to be this good, but the most comparable person whose game that I've seen in the years that I can compare him to would be a Dwight Freeney. Dwight Freeney has never been a edge-setting, physical run-stopping presence, but he's been a very good pass rusher throughout his career. And I see Harris a very similar type of player. And you just got to remember it's not easy in the NFL to get guys that can consistently beat tackles, NFL-level tackles. And I really believe Harris is going to be able to do that. The speed off the ball and the body control he has to move his body, spin his body, it's unique. And so I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised at the ability we're going to have to put on a quarterback with him and Wake rushing at the same time. And when you do that, what that fundamentally does for your defense is huge, because everybody's been watching games and you can tell when the defense is having trouble getting pressure on the quarterback that in turn forces your defensive coordinator to start becoming more aggressive, blitzing. The more you blitz, the bigger risks you're taking, and that a lot of times ends up losing you football games. And the reality is you're having to do that because you can't put pressure on the quarterback with your front four. If you're able to do that, what you can do defensively changes drastically, because now you can leave extra guys in coverage and you're still, getting guys right in there after the quarterback. So the amount of time in today's NFL that you have to be rushing the quarterback is substantially higher than it used to be. And so even though I view Harris right now as more primarily a one-dimensional pass rusher, not an every down defensive end, the number of snaps they're going to need him on the field just to rush that quarterback is going to more than make up for where he's picked at. I was with everybody else with Reuben Foster, but I think as the Reuben Foster pick approached, at first you've got this kind of fairy tale going like, oh my God, he's falling. But then you start to realize why he's falling. And there isn't that Reuben Foster right now that everybody's thinking he is. I'm pretty confident there is something wrong with his shoulder. Teams realize that he's probably going to have another surgery on his shoulders. I realize that he did have a diluted urine sample. I did some research, and that's not a common thing at all, that a diluted urine sample happens because I was overhydrated. More than likely, he was hiding something. And, maybe it was just a stupid weekend of him smoking pot, but it could also be that he's using performance-enhancing drugs. And so
Chad, just to interject for just a moment, I watched his interview on First Take, and he even openly admitted that he probably did something he wasn't supposed to. So it's like, doesn't that just kind of destroy the whole lie that you just made about being hydrated?
Exactly. And so you got to wonder, is this guy going to be an off-the-field problem? And then the last thing that stuck out to me is he had a 9 on the Wonderlic test. And I don't know if that means he didn't take it seriously, but, you got to wonder, is this guy going to be prepped when you're trying to execute a game plan? You watch him on film, and he's absolutely a devastating tackler. He takes in angles, and he just destroys people. But how good is a tackle that just blows somebody up when 3 other plays you're not where you're supposed to be, or you over pursue, letting the other team, be effectively taking advantage of you being in the wrong positions. And so after it was over, I actually kind of felt good. I'm like, maybe it was a good thing we didn't get Reuben Foster in here, because maybe it just wasn't the right fit. And I feel like Harris is a pretty safe pick. You absolutely need that advantage to be able to rush people from guys that have their hand in the dirt without having to be blitz heavy at times in the game. And we needed to get that youthful defensive end in here that replaced Cameron Wake. And so I liked the pick. If you take the Reuben Foster fantasy out of it, I don't know who else would have made a lot more sense there. Everybody else tied to the Dolphins ended up mostly being in the second round, whether you're talking about McMillan or you're talking about Lamp or Cunningham. That those feel to me like that would have been a reach for Miami to take them there. And I think they got very, very fortunate that I don't think Harris would have lasted more than 3 or 4 more picks, and he came down to him because there was just kind of an odd jump on offensive players that wasn't expected in the draft.
All right, before I cut to Ron, I just want to ask the question then. If so far the consensus is Charles Harris was a great move, but then my question would be, why did we never hear about this guy? Like, this whole time we were talking about players, it was always Taco Charlton, Reuben Foster, Forrest Lamp, and because Zach Cunningham and all these guys. And I understand why the Dolphins did it. They explained that, we didn't want to show our hand. But literally, I didn't see any teams talking about Charles Harris. So why is it that now it's a good idea, but we had never heard of this guy up until now?
I was kind of watching him as we fell through the draft. I honestly think he's probably the best hand in the dirt pass rusher in the draft. Now, he's definitely not Myles Garrett, where he can do everything. You can put Myles Garrett in any down in the game, and he can seal the edge. He can rush the passer. But if you're talking about a guy that's just doing nothing but rushing the passer with his hand in the dirt, he was one of the best available prospects in the draft. And I had him in there as a couple defensive ends that didn't look like, if you did mocks, were going to make it to the Dolphins. So I don't think it could have fallen much better for them. And if you look at the picks that went behind him, I didn't see somebody that Miami should have taken instead of Harris.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Ron. Wait, no, go ahead, Duke.
One thing to go along with what Chad was saying is I think one thing that kind of hurt Harris, at least in terms of the fan perspective, was when you watch him on tape, he looks like, people compared him to Wade. He looks like he's going to be this phenomenal athlete. And then he went to the combine and he posted mediocre numbers. I mean, like a 4.82 or something to that effect, whereas I think Wade ran like a 4.5 something. I mean, so he's similar type build, and he just comes in and his testing numbers were so they weren't congruent with what you saw on tape, and so I think people saw that and they're like, oh well, maybe he's not as good as people think he is, or whatever else like that. And it's what everybody said. A lot of folks on Twitter said after the pick was, it's one of these where you have to basically trust your evaluation of the tape and not go off of testing numbers. And I think that hurt him in fans' perspective.
All right. So, Ron, last one for Charles Harris. Go ahead.
Yes. I just feel like the Dolphins really needed to, first of all, do something at the defensive end position. I really wanted them to take Foster, and I'm not mad they didn't, because right before the pick came out, and I know you were in a big crowd, but right before we were about to get to Miami, or maybe a pick before that, they started announcing about this shoulder injury from Foster. So I knew before we even picked, I was like, that's it. We're not going to take him. So I'd kind of accepted it at this moment, wasn't crushed, but they really had to do something at the defensive end position, and they'll probably still need to next year, because I mean, right now, Harris is just an injury or two away from having to start. I mean, that's just the truth. With a couple, with a 30-something-year-old Wake and Andre Branch just ahead, and what Hayes is 32. So two of the top three guys are in their 30s. So they're still a little thin at playmaker at that position. So it was an absolute necessity for them to get a guy that can rush the passer. And I didn't know a lot about him going in. Like you said, Lewis, how come we weren't hearing about that guy? Well, that's because teams definitely don't want to show their hand. And if we don't hear about him from a bunch of teams, it's because teams don't show their hand. I mean, we listen to an analyst all day long, but analysts look at the combine, they look at numbers, and they just look at things like that. But it's the teams that are doing true evaluations on these guys and true scouting reports. What the analysts do is just a tenth, if that, of what these teams will actually do. And of course, teams will leak out false information on some guys and not say a thing about another guy. But I'm happy that they did something at defensive end. It was a necessity. And like I said, I think they'll have to do it again next year. Honestly, I think it'll be a necessity again going into the 2018 draft.
All right, so that takes care of the first round. Now, of course, second round was Rayquan McMillan, linebacker out of Ohio State in the Big Ten. I'm actually kind of shocked that they were able to get their hands on him. I wasn't actually expecting him to draft fall that far down. And ironically enough, Zach Cunningham, who I know that Duke is a big fan of. We've discussed it ad nauseum over how much we really like Zach Cunningham. But the Dolphins went with Rayquan McMillan. Now, I don't know why they decided to do that. I personally saw a lot of Cunningham. I didn't watch much of McMillan, but what we're looking at here is that McMillan is a serious run stopper. He sometimes has trouble switching directions, but he does have sideline-to-sideline speed. So if he needs to chase someone down, he can, which is a big deal considering the Dolphins had the 30th ranked run defense in the NFL last year. So McMillan being there already is a massive boost. And then if you have Timmons in the middle and Kiko on the other side, that means you have three linebackers who can instantly stop the run if necessary. Now, I know a lot of people make the argument, well, the Dolphins run too much nickel for that. Why did you waste your time? Because if you I'm probably wrong with my theory that I'm about to give, but let's just throw it out there anyway. Maybe the reason they played so much nickel was because they knew they didn't have a third good linebacker. I mean, straight up, who did they have? They had Kiko, they had Jelani Jenkins, who was injured, at least that's what they say that he was injured the whole season, and he could barely even move. And every time he was on the field, it was painful to watch. And you had Neville Hewitt, and Cole Meese went down in like week 3. So that was about it. That's all they had at linebacker. So, of course, they're going to play more nickel. They're going to try and get the best players they can on the football field. Maybe now that they have 3 linebackers, they'll be able to actually do more standard 4-3 defense. So that's my take on it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Ron, this time. Your thoughts on Rayquan McMillan? Hello?
I'm sorry, I'd muted my mic. Okay, I'm back. As I'd been stating for years, linebacker had become such an issue because of just the poor drafting that the team had done at that position over the past 4 years, or I should say, not drafting at all, really, honestly. So they'd continuously trying to just find ways to find guys to put in there, and Misi was hurt a lot, so that definitely didn't help. And we grabbed a couple free agents that, I mean, we're barely. I mean, these guys weren't even starters, and we were putting them in as starters. So that was an issue. And it was finally time to draft a linebacker, higher in the draft and get somebody with some talent. And I just like the way the Dolphins overall are, beyond the first pick with Harris, it's a pass rusher, but they're getting a lot of run stuffers in this draft right now. They're trying to fix what was a major problem. Probably the number one problem on this team was stopping the run. So we'll see how they can develop him as a guy who can maybe do some covering. Because, I mean, in the NFL, if you're out on the field, you're going to end up covering some guys. That's for sure. And I've seen a little, and when I say I've seen some film, I've seen some video clips of him covering some backs and things like that and doing a decent job of it. Of course, that's at the college level. But obviously he's not known as a guy that can cover, but he's definitely known as a guy who can stop the run. And that's really what we needed, definitely. And hopefully he's just a guy that can come in and stay healthy. He may play more than any other rookie that we drafted. It's very possible. He may see more time on the field than any other rookie, I think. So he'll be an important part of the defense this year, I believe.
And just to add to Ron's point about the whole drafting a linebacker early, the last time that the Dolphins drafted a linebacker as early as the second round was actually Koamisi. So there's just that little tidbit right there. And of course, and I believe they drafted.
That trade down too, where we passed on. Who was the guy? Who's the safety in Seattle that we passed on? Somebody help me out.
Was
Earl
it
Thomas?
Earl Thomas? Yeah.
We traded down and we ended up with
Koa.
Oh, now I'm drawing a blank. We ended up with Koa, but we also ended up with the lineman that went to the Jags a couple years
Jared
ago.
Odrick.
Jared
How
Odrick.
could you forget J.O.?
I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but we ended up with those two guys, and they were fairly productive, over a few years. But man, to think about being able to have Earl Thomas. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, and
are you ready for mind-blowing stat?
Say again.
Okay, are you ready for a mind-blowing stat?
Go ahead, go for it, Duke.
Despite Rayquan McMillan, who is the newest, shiniest toy that the Dolphins drafted, Koamisi, who was originally drafted
as a defensive end, yeah, that's what I was about to say.
He was drafted as a linebacker, but an edge rushing linebacker. But besides that, of all stand-up off-ball linebackers, Koamisi is the highest drafted linebacker that the Dolphins have drafted since Jackie Shipp in 1984.
Ouch.
And now, guys like Carlos Dansby was drafted higher, but he was a free agent. Of course, we had Zach Thomas all these years. He was a fifth-round pick. He was a star, and that was a diamond in the rough. But Miami has not drafted a linebacker. Koamisi was, I believe, the 40th pick in that draft, 40th or 43rd, I can't remember. That is the highest pick Miami's used on a linebacker since Shipp in '84, who was the 14th pick, I think, in that draft. Every other linebacker Miami has drafted has come after the 43rd pick, and that doesn't count Deion Jordan, who, in my opinion, was an edge player. He was not ever an off-ball linebacker, despite people wanting to use him that way. You could use him that way, but his job was to be a pass rusher. Whereas Nisi, he kind of was, and he ended up becoming more of an off-ball linebacker anyway. So, yeah, that shows where Miami has put its draft preferences.
Yeah, let's not. Should we go into the list of the massive list of undrafted linebackers that we've had over the past few years alone? Sheesh. It's like Mike Hall, Zach Vigil, Neville Hewitt. It's like the list probably goes longer than that.
Many of them still on the team.
Yeah, I mean, if McMillan becomes a superstar, who cares where he was drafted? The problem is, you look at other teams like, I mean, New England has spent at least one recent pick on an off-ball linebacker with Hightower. Pittsburgh does. A lot of these teams have spent these high picks and got these linebackers. And I think, people are like, oh, we've got, here's Reuben Foster, who, he wouldn't have been there there hadn't been red flags. But, you get a guy like that, and suddenly you're like, all right, we've got this guy who, in my opinion, on the field, Reuben Foster completely changes Miami defense. Completely. They are a different beast with him on the field, the way he plays the game. But they just have not, Dolphins have just not invested in the linebacker position. So they're at least highly in it. It's always been late round guys, mid round guys. And yeah, they struck gold with Thomas, but they haven't since. And, honestly, the most successful linebacker Miami has drafted in a long time is probably Jelani Jenkins.
And he crashed and burned something fierce.
His is injuries, though. I mean, I'm not going to say he's bad. His is he cannot stay healthy, which was kind of a knock on him coming out. Was he was healthy, health concerns. But so at least with McMillan, they, even though he wasn't drafted as high, at least they're trying. They went early to that position.
All right. So, can you talk real quick specifically about McMillan then?
Yeah, I'm doing my write-up of him right now. Number one, the guy makes tackles. He's not the cruise missile that Reuben Foster is when it comes to hitting guys. He doesn't have that type of speed that Foster has. But the guy, number one, he's faster than you think. I ran a 4.61 at 240 pounds. That's pretty good. So the guy's got a little bit of speed, but when he hits you, he's not the power hitter that's going to knock somebody's helmet off or put him on a highlight reel. But he's going to hit you. He's going to get his hands on you, and you're going down. You're not going to just bounce off of it. What was it a couple of years ago that they were playing Philadelphia, and they had their slot receiver go across the middle, and he just bounced off Kelvin Shepard and kept on going and got a first down. Yeah, that's not happening with McMillan. That hit happens with McMillan, and that guy goes down right there on the spot. He's very instinctive. He's not going to. He doesn't. The tape I've watched, he didn't take any false steps. He's not going to. And that doesn't count things like counters or misdirections, like a read option kind of thing, where they intentionally try to fake you out. This wasn't like he didn't know where he was supposed to be. And I know one guy that a lot of fans liked a couple of years ago was Denzel Perryman. But every time I watched him, there was always 4 or 5 plays where he would take 2 or 3 steps in the wrong direction and then recover. You never see that with McMillan. He diagnoses very quickly. He's got the instincts. He's very smart. He's going to get there. He's better in coverage than you think. He's not going to be, a lockdown defender in the passing game, but he's not as completely out of element there.
Well, Duke, let's give this litmus test then. Is Tom Brady going to pick on him if he's on the field?
Oh yeah, Tom Brady will pick on him right now. But number one, because his head is going to be spinning. Of course, by the time they play Patriots, he's going to be later in the season. He'll kind of pick up on things. But let's say they were playing week 1. He's going to. They would use him. They would. The Dolphins and Matt Burke would have to kind of hide him a little bit. And to be fair, Tom Brady's going to pick on Lawrence Timmons too. He's going to pick on all the linebackers because that's what he does. And right now, I don't see really any of the linebackers on the Dolphins that have this great coverage ability. So they're going to get picked on. But they would use him. They would use him to. They would try to. If I had to think what the Patriots would do and be their offensive coordinator, I would use plays that would draw him in toward the line of scrimmage, get him moving in that direction, and then kick it out to a running back on the edge that's going to force him to use his use that speed, which is decent but not great, to get out there and cover him. That's what I think they will do right at this point, because the Dolphins are too smart to line him up man-to-man against Gronk or whoever they're going to line up their tight end. They're not going to do that. So they would use, plays to where they, like I said, they bring him toward the middle and then force him to change direction and go outside, which is not his strong suit at this point. The other thing that kind of would concern me at this point is, from what I've seen, is he's got long arms. He's got 33-inch arms, which compared to Asiata, I think they say his name, I think he was like 33 and like a third. So, I mean, he's got the same kind of arms as a guard. He doesn't use them well. He doesn't use that length to his advantage to stack and shed. And when we watched film on Cunningham, you saw it. Cunningham would hold the guy up, throw him to the side, and make the play. And McMillan does that, just not very consistently, at least from what the games that I saw. So that would be my concern at this point. We need to get him he had 23 reps of 225, so he's strong. But let's use that length to his advantage, get him disengaged. And this is all stuff that's going to be coaching. And it'll get there. I mean, the guy's only 20 years old. He won't turn 21 until I think I read week 12. So, the guy's young. He's got time to develop into probably a good, solid middle linebacker. And to something that you were talking about with the Seattle game, when I was doing film review of Seattle last year, a lot of the nickel packages they use nickel most of that game. Cole Nisi was in there more than Jenkins was. At least they Alonzo was in there the entire time, but at least to start the game, they kept Nisi in on the nickel packages, and Jenkins was on the sideline. I found that interesting. If they would do that, you'd think it'd be the other way around, but I think Nisi had about 60 to 70% of the nickel snaps in that game. So, they're probably going to mix and match with who they put in there, move guys around. But I would expect to see McMillan in sub packages quite often, if for no other reason, just for the fact that he can attack the line of scrimmage. So if they try to spread him out and then run the ball, he's gonna get in there and make tackles, and they're not gonna gash guys in a 3-receiver set for 6 yards every run or something.
All right, Chad. Now you, Mr. Rayquan McMillan.
Yeah, Rayquan McMillan. So my thing on this is, and I'm going to circle back on this concept with one of the other players we're going to cover, but I was getting tired of Miami drafting defensive ends that they believe could also play strong side linebacker. Deion Jordan is a good example. And this guy, Rayquan McMillan, is a linebacker. So he's not a player that's got to convert to playing.
He's not a hybrid.
He's not. He's not a guy who's spent half his college career with his hand in the dirt. He's a guy that played linebacker. He's fully capable of being a middle linebacker. And as I said earlier, he's a very sound tackler. And so, that's something that's been lacking. And, I was listening to your comment. Is Tom Brady going to pick apart in part? Yeah, Tom Brady picks everybody apart. And if you think you're bringing him in to put him in pass coverage against Tom Brady, you would be crazy. I'll tell you what he can do is he's going to be able to tackle somebody like LeGarrette Blount and put him down. And teams last year exploited Miami repeatedly by just power running to the right side. And you remember it, Lewis. When we were prepping games, you're like, I just don't know. Miami's struggling stopping power running backs right now. That's what this guy is here for. This guy is here to know where he's supposed to be. He's got actually much better speed than people realize, and Duke touched on that. He ran a 4.6. You watch his highlight films, this guy gets around and moves well. He's probably not going to be a strong man-to-man coverage guy, but he'll absolutely be able to cover an area in a zone effectively, and that's typically all your strong side linebacker is going to be expected to do in pass coverage. So I think he's a great addition, and I like the way they've set up their linebacking core. You have the linebackers are all crossovers. So like Rayquan McMillan can play strong side, he can play the middle. Timmons can play strong side, he can play the middle. Kiko Alonso can play the middle, he can play the weak side. So I think it's going to give them defensively some variety that makes it a little bit difficult at times for an offense to understand who's doing what on a play, because they have the ability to play different linebacker positions. So that honestly was my biggest takeaway, is they actually got a real strong side linebacker to take the place of Cole Messi, because I am just so tired of year in and year out this free agent fodder that we have the worst linebackers in the league. They finally invested in a guy that actually can come in, replace him, and do a sound job tackling. I mean, I know that's not an all-world linebacker. He isn't the athlete that Cunningham is probably in terms of being able to cover in space. But I was just tired of linebackers that can't tackle. I mean, to me, if you're a linebacker, you've got to be a really good fundamental tackler. And we finally have linebackers that can do that. So we should see a massive upgrade in Miami this year in their linebacker play.
Now, before we switch to the next guy, I wanted to ask real quick for Duke. Very briefly, Duke. I know how big you were on Cunningham. So is there anything that McMillan can do that Cunningham doesn't do quite as well?
Tackle.
Okay, well, there's that.
I mean, that's
not even a comparison. That's not even a comparison. Like, if you look at the film on Cunningham, he's a great athlete and he's a rangy athlete, but he is not a near the sound tackler that McMillan is. The concept they were using in the draft, which is an accurate concept, is they called him a drag down tackler, meaning that he's going to get a hold of a guy and hold on, and a lot of times that guy's going to get another yard or two after contact on Cunningham. Whereas you watch the film on McMillan, he's a solid, thick, 240-pound guy. He takes people to the ground when he gets them. So there's a big difference. Obviously, they're completely different players, and schematically, you would use Cunningham completely differently than you would use McMillan. But what we needed was somebody that can take Comesi's spot. He hasn't played a full season in years, and this guy is more than capable of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be able to, and I don't think tackling with Cunningham was quite as bad as it was made out to be. I mean, he missed some tackles, and I read things that, well, a lot of that was that he was the position that he was put in based on the rest of the defense kind of put him in a position to have issues there. There was a guy who did a couple of YouTube videos where he went over some film. He hit the title for Cunningham was tackling machine. So, I mean, he believed that he could be a tackler, and Cunningham went to Houston, so he's going to play inside in that 3-4 that they've got or whatever type of thing. So that's going to fit him well. And so I think, first of all, fans need to understand that comparison. He's going to be asked to do his responsibility there. It's going to be a little bit different than what it would have been in Miami. So you can't really compare what he's going to do, because he's probably going to end up with better stats and stuff than McMillan is, at least this year. But yeah, I mean, for the coverage ability, yeah, Cunningham's great. He's very instinctive and all this stuff. It's kind of the same kind of things. But McMillan hits the guy, gets his hands on the guy, that guy's going to the ground. You really can't say that about Cunningham with any consistency. And really, any of Miami's linebackers. I don't know how Timmons will be. You know, he played well in Pittsburgh. But, I mean, we've watched so many linebackers, as Chad said, we've watched so many linebackers with Miami miss tackles, and that's not what McMillan does.
Well, that's good. So let's go ahead and switch to the next guy. Like, wow, we've taken a long time on just the first two. I think as we go on, we're going to start taking less time because we know less about these guys. Let's go ahead and switch to Cordrea Tankersley, and that is how you say it. It's like for a while I was saying Cordrea, but then I was told that no, it's Cordrea. Like Beats by Dre. So anyway, third round, there were people. Say again.
Can I start on this one?
Oh, for sure. Go ahead. But let me just give the quick rundown. Cordrea Tankersley out of Clemson, round 3, the 33rd pick in the 33rd overall pick. He's got a lot of stuff going on to him, and actually, our own Matthew Knowles pointed out that he actually has some similarities to Brent Grimes, just without the extracurriculars at the on the sideline. But what I digress is Cordrea Tankersley might actually turn out to be a decent prospect, and I'm actually pretty happy the Dolphins managed to get him in the 3rd round and not the 2nd, because if they hadn't gone for it with him in the 2nd, then I might have been upset. So I'm glad they got him in the 3rd. he's going to add some depth to the cornerback position, which we found out after last year we needed because we were down to nobody pretty much. So I'm glad they got him, and I'm actually pretty impressed with what he can do as long as he can just kind of stop panicking and start getting more aggressive with his tackles and consistency. So, Duke, you requested to go first, so have at it. Cordrea Tankersley out of Clemson.
Oh, the reason I requested to go first is because he was not even on my radar until I read that article that he was on the Dolphins' radar. So I know absolutely nothing about this guy. So that's it. I know nothing. I don't know what it's about.
All right, then. Ron? Mr. Caniff.
I'm here. Yes. One thing is, I find the Brent Grimes comparisons a little different because it just seems like maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got some weird stats, but he has more size than Grimes.
Well, he
doesn't
does.
he?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
But I'm talking the comparison that Matthew Knowles made was more about the ball skills and his ability to like ball hawk and keep an eye on these guys.
It's not because he has a crazy wife or anything.
No, that's
Okay.
that's an extra bonus.
Okay. One thing I'll just keep saying, and it's an observation, and I just can't help but when I see picks, I just like to see how it kind of all fits together. That's just kind of the way I always look at things. The Dolphins' size at cornerback, and now they've done it again, is just interesting, and it seems like they got a second round guy again, like a guy that could have, maybe if he was in last year's draft, maybe he goes instead of Xavier Howard. Maybe those guys go almost back to back in the second round. I mean, they've got a couple second round cornerbacks now, young guys, and we don't even necessarily we don't have to play him. We have enough talent now, and Lippett's starting to get some experience, and we still have McCain, although he doesn't really fit the mold of what the rest of our guys are, and we have Pitts, and
yeah, Bobby's
obviously
the slot guy, so
yeah, and obviously we have Maxwell. But I think I said this about the middle of last year. I said, we had a lot of injuries and it was looking bleak at cornerback, but I liked what we were looking at going into this year, and now I like it even more. And I just love having size at cornerback. It's such an opposite philosophy of what Philbin was doing. He had a lot of smaller guys, and about the only holdover in that now is Bobby McCain from that group. I just like the size, and I like that we don't have to start this guy right away. And hopefully, God willing, with not a lot of injury, he'll just be able to kind of work his way into some play, into some nickel play, into some special teams, what have you. And I'd like, again, I love that we kept going defense in this draft. And this was just another example of a position that needed a little bit more young talent, although I think it needed it a little less than some of the other positions. So I felt like it was a good pick, and I felt like maybe they got more value out of this pick than any other, possibly. I'd be curious to hear what Chris or Chad have to say on that.
Yeah, and another thing that I want to bring up just real quick, just kind of a fact check thing. Tony Lippett was I believe he was in the same draft as Bobby McCain, so he's technically another holdover.
That's true, but he definitely doesn't fit the mold.
Yeah,
of
he
what
doesn't
they were
fit
drafting.
the Philbin mold. Yeah,
yeah, and what they were drafting at that time, which I think is part of why he's probably still around.
Yeah. All right. So, Chad, go ahead on Cordrea Tankersley. Do you know anything about the guy? Because I didn't before he was picked.
Well, I looked up, some of the footage on him and his intangibles and stuff, and he clearly is. I'm just calling him a prototype corner, and what Miami's wanting. They want tall guys that can, do press coverage on the outside, and that's their philosophy. The guy's he's very talented. He ran a easy 4.4 in the combine. He's fast, and so there's certain positions I don't get too caught up on the combine. That's why when you guys are talking about Charles Harris's combine numbers, like I don't really care because I don't learn a lot about a defensive end at a combine. But certain positions, corner being one of them, you have got to have elite speed to be corner in the NFL because you need to be able to have that recovery if you make a mistake. And so
to be able to keep up with the Mike Wallace and Kenny Stills of the world.
Oh yeah, I mean I can live with a receiver that runs a 4.5 and has great hands and runs crisp routes. I can't live with a corner that doesn't have elite speed because teams figure out that you don't have elite speed and you become a liability in a hurry. And so he has the physical ability, both the size and the speed, to be an elite corner. And he actually isn't a bad corner in film. He clearly, I don't know where the Brent Grimes comparison comes, because Brent Grimes is elite. He is very good in technical attributes of a corner. He is so fluid in his technique, and this guy is not. He's a grabber.
Well, it's
I know
about
you
the
hate,
ball
Lewis.
skills. It's about the ball
It
skills,
is,
Chad.
but I've seen a lot of grabbing, and I know you hate that in corners, Lewis.
Yeah, I hate it. Yeah, I do.
And
I
so
hate it.
he's going to need to be coached. But I'll tell you what this pick is. One is this draft was very deep in corners, and so getting a guy with his attributes in the third is a steal. And so this was just a year where you had the ability to get a guy like that in the third. In most drafts, he's a second round pick. And so they got the value there. And this is all about Jarvis Landry. And what I mean by that is the Dolphins are going to have to put out a nice contract for Jarvis. They're going to have to pay the man. Whether they do a big 4-year deal or they have to take him next year, Jarvis Landry's getting paid next year. And so that means Byron Maxwell absolutely will not be on the Miami Dolphins after this season unless there's a horrific injury or he takes a massive restructuring. He just is too expensive at corner, and the Dolphins are really loaded with young talent right now at the corner position. I mean, don't sleep on Lafayette Pitts, and don't sleep on Lippett either. He came a long ways last year, and so they've got a pretty good stable of young corners. And so this, again, what I was mentioning, I like bringing a young, talented player and putting him behind a veteran to learn from. And then when his time to step up, I feel like he's much more prepared. And so this is clearly, he's coming in to learn from Byron Maxwell. He'll get to spend a whole season learning behind him and give him a really good athlete. That's a really nice thing to have when you're doing special teams. You want tall guys that are fast on special teams. So I have to suspicion he'll spend a lot of times on special teams this season, and he then will either be starting potentially next year with Xavier Howard, or he'll be the third corner, and Tony Lippett might be starting next year with Xavier Howard. But either way, it's a very good value pick, and it puts the Dolphins in position next year to free up that cap space away from Byron Maxwell and shift it over to someplace like Jarvis Landry. And so that to me is what this pick was all about.
You could be right, but is it selfish of me to hope that Byron will love Miami so much that he will take a lower discount for the next year?
It doesn't look like it's a fit. I mean, we went through the same thing, Lewis, with Brandon Albert. Everybody knew when you bring Laremy Tunsil in, he is going to be the left tackle, so you can't pay a guy like Brandon Albert, it's $8 or $9 million of your cap when you've got a guy behind him that's better and much cheaper. And so you need that money somewhere else because you've got a really good left tackle. And so with the talent Miami has right now at the corner position, I just don't see Byron. The only way I see Byron Maxwell being around after this season is if there's a really bad injury to, like, let's say Xavier Howard tears his ACL late in the season. Well, then they're going to be trying to rehab him, and they may decide to pay Byron Maxwell one more season, to keep the depth here. But if everybody's healthy coming into next year, I can't imagine their plan is not to coach Tankersley through this season and have him prepared to, at a minimum, be the third corner, the third boundary corner anyway for next year.
Were you trying to say something, Duke?
No, that one thing you mentioned, I saw the thing on Twitter about the Brent Grimes, and what confused me there is, number one, everything I've read about Tankersley says he's a press man guy, and he's not as good at zone stuff, whereas to me, Grimes was more of a zone-only corner. He's not a guy that you want to use in press, just due to physical limitations. I don't know. That's just what I read. One thing that Tankersley does bring is speed. Chad mentioned, I don't know what Lippett ran at the combine. I think Howard was a 4.5 guy. I don't know what Maxwell is, but he's not exactly, a speed guy. So we actually have a guy on the outside now who does at least have that long speed that he needs, that a cornerback needs in order to recover. I don't mind another outside corner. The question is who's going to play inside. I have seen suggestions on Twitter that Xavier Howard should move inside, or at least he'll play outside and then move inside on in the nickel. I've seen suggestions that Byron Maxwell should move inside on nickel down and let like Howard, Tankersley, or Lippert, or whoever cover the outside. So that's just, I don't know how you guys feel about that. I mean, McCain was an outside corner mostly at Memphis. He, he's learning the nickel position. It always takes a while to learn. So I expect him to be better this year than he was last year. But right now, it looks like, in my opinion, it's him and Michael Thomas are who's going to be covering the Julian Edelmans and Brandon Cooks of the world. And I just don't know that I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, we have these nice big outside guys to cover, Sammy Watkins. But what about one of the little slot guys? What about the Jarvis Landry? Who's going to cover those guys for Miami? I just don't see any of the with Maxwell and the three young guys that, Lippett and whoever, I just don't see any of them being able to move inside. So I don't know. What are y'all's thoughts?
I'm not ready to give up on Bobby yet.
I'm with you there too. I agree 100%, Liz. I think Miami's plan this year is Bobby McCain will be the slot corner, if you will, and I think that I really think Pitts will be the backup guy behind him in the slot. So I know Bobby McCain is not elite. I mean, it'd be nice to have a 5'10" corner in there that runs just blazing fast and is technically sound, but it's just not easy to get. So McCain's learned a lot. He should be better than ever this year after having a few years under his belt. But I mean, I feel bad because whoever plays slot in the AFC East, you got to get torn apart for 2 years because the Patriots are so effective at their short passing game and they just tear slot corners apart. So I think you can get a decent slot corner that looks like a very bad one when you're in the AFC East.
Oh, one thing I want to add too is I did mention that I kind of like the group as a whole, the cornerback spot, but it is a lot of young talent and there are still question marks. And we really don't have that shutdown guy either that some teams have. And not every team has that shutdown guy. But I just kind of want to add that too, that, I mean, yeah, it looks nice, but we still may be looking to address this position as well next year. We're really not sure yet how this whole thing's going to shake out. We could end up really striking gold because we have some young, higher drafted guys that could all of a sudden, like Howard, could all of a sudden really spring up this year. It's very possible. But at this point, it's really an unknown with that group. It just looks like we have some talent that could develop. We just don't know yet.
I'm going to make a bold statement for you guys. Are you ready? I've just been kind of following him on Twitter and watching his workouts, and I think Xavier Howard is going to be right at the Pro Bowl this year. I think he's that good. I actually, Lou, I think he's that good. So,
well, what that would mean for our team would be amazing. I mean, that would just be him and Devontae Parker. If those two guys just sprung out of nowhere really hit for us, it would just be so much more for this team, and it would make this team so much better.
I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Right now, everything I'm seeing from Xavier Howard, what I've seen when he did play, I mean, keep in mind, he went in and did a pretty good job last year without a training camp as a rookie. He's phenomenally talented. He's built thick enough to be very solid in run support, and he can cover anybody in the league when he's that good of an athlete. And so, granted, he's still going to be somewhat inexperienced, but if he's healthy, and that was a big issue for him last year, is he just couldn't stay healthy. But if he's 100% and he's in there, he is our number one corner. Going into next year, I feel very confident it will be Xavier Howard. I'm not near as confident on who's going to be on the other side. I'm not even sure who's going to be on the other side this year. You can assume it's going to be Byron Maxwell, but it could be Tony Lippett. And who knows? Maybe Tankersley will pick on really quick. And so the real question going into next year, and Ron's right, is are one of those three guys, Lippett, Tankersley, or Maxwell, going to really elevate and be a really clear, solid number two corner? Or are we still going to be looking for the number two guy next year? And we're really not going to know that until the Bullets are live this season.
Yep. And I would like to also point out that since we didn't actually draft a safety, I'm wondering if the fact that they didn't go with it is either a vote of confidence for Nate Allen, who at one point was a Pro Bowler, or if we're actually going to give it Walt Aikens another shot because he would be the other depth guy behind. It's going to be Allen, Michael Thomas, and Walt Aikens.
I think McDonald is. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You go ahead, Ron. You were going right where I was going. Yeah, I think that's the safety right there.
Yeah, the safety there it's McDonald. It's not, and he's not coming. He won't be coming back from an injury. He'll be coming back from an 8-week suspension. So we assume he should be ready to go. And I think a combination of him and Jones will be a really good combination at safety. We might not really have to look at that spot from a starting position for a few more years, and then we can keep guys like Akins and even Allen as depth. I like where that position is right now. I don't feel they needed to really address it in this draft.
You know what?
Oh,
I'm not gonna lie. I completely forgot about TJ McDonald.
That's their strategy, Lewis. I mean, he's going to be a serviceable veteran, and don't forget they got Michael Thomas, and so he's also a serviceable.
Yeah, him I remembered.
And so they've got plenty of depth at the safety position. Do they have the answer? Who's they're paired with Rashad Jones? Probably not. There was talent in the draft, but he's a solid safety, and so is Allen if he's healthy, and so they'll be fine. But I don't know if you've watched some of the highlights from McDonald, but that guy can hit. And so I'm excited to see him and Jones together because that's going to be scary for the smaller slot receivers and the smaller running backs out in the flats because those guys are going to come up and pop some people. So it's going to be fun to watch them in games together.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that position this year. I hadn't said much yet because it's early, but I'm super excited about that position. I wish McDonald could get that suspension cut a little bit. I don't even know if he's trying. I don't know if it's a done deal. I keep checking to see if maybe somehow it goes down to 6 games or 5 games or something.
I think Stephen Ross needs to pick up the phone, call our cartoon character of a commissioner, Goodell, and say, hey, we have been the home team 2 out of the last 3 years in London. We started our last seasons in Seattle. I think it's about time for you to scratch my back after you've hosed us on the schedule. Why don't you cut him down to 4 games for us?
Oh, okay, yeah, I see. He violated the NFL substance abuse program. Okay, gotcha. All right, well, I guess that takes care of the safety position. So we're good then. Go ahead, Duke. Were you going to say something?
I was going to say, I mean, for TJ McDonald, he'd have been better off, to hit a woman instead of doing drugs. He'd have got less suspension.
Oh my God, bruh.
That's a 4-hour conversation off of football. That is punishment. The crime.
Total and complete sarcasm intended to show the hypocrisy of the.
I know, man, but it's just when
it comes off. But before a listener out there hears that and thinks,
yeah, like what?
No. The fact that you can hit a woman in the NFL and get 2 or 3 games, but smoke a doobie and you're done.
Hey, if you guys want some humor in there, most teams if you hit a woman, they take you off their draft board. There is one team in the NFL that elevates you up their draft board, and that's the Bengals.
Oh God, what is this show now?
That's awesome.
I know that's terrible, but I had to say that in this draft because Joe Mixon's obviously a talented player, but I'm just looking at him like, you can't be serious that you're going to put him with Pac-Man Jones and Burfict as the people he's going to be around in the NFL.
It was an unnecessary pick, too, if you think about it. They already had Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard.
Oh, I couldn't think of a if I were to say, all right, I'm going to put this young kid who's had a lot of trouble, let's put him in a structure where he's going to, kind of put himself together. You're putting him with players that have routinely had off the field problems to hang out with. So that's going to be an interesting playground in the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah. I'm glad they brought out Anthony Munoz to announce that pick because he's a big dude. But you could tell them bullying. But if you really want to, I hate the Baltimore Ravens. I despise that franchise. They are equivalent to the Patriots, Jets, and Bills and Colts for me. Despise that franchise. So if you ever want to stick it to them, just remind them that their front office made Ray Rice's girlfriend apologize for the distraction she caused, and fans cheered it. Just remind them what kind of fan base and organization they truly have. See how they feel about that. You'll probably get blocked.
Well, we're going to take care of it this year, Duke. We get another round with them, so they've been beating up on us. So
can we finally
this is the year of the Dolphins, the new Miami.
Yeah, new Miami. Speaking of the new Miami, how about this guy who's actually going to be able to help us get past those stinking Baltimore Ravens for once? How about Isaac Asiata out of Utah? That's EJ's home state. Round 5, pick number 20 in the round. He is a big boy, 323 pounds. He can play guard. He can play center. This guy is a mauler that makes Billy Turner look like a wuss. I think we're finally took care of the left guard position once and for all, and I couldn't be happier about that. Finally, we have our offensive line taken care of, so I'm happy there.
Yeah,
So
can I go on this one, Lewis?
go for it.
My favorite pick. I absolutely loved this pick, and this was the only point in the draft where I was nervous. I was mad because I'm like, we have got to get this guy. And when the Dolphins moved up, I was like, thank you, Tannenbaum and Greer. You had to go get this guy. And here's why. He's not a polished, finished guard that's just a plug in start. He's going to need to learn better pass protection, and he's going to probably struggle like every rookie does at understanding who to pick up in the complex blitzes that get thrown at you in the NFL. But when you talk about what you're getting, again, like when I was mentioning, there's certain things in the combine I have to see. I have to have a corner that's got 4.4 speed so he can recover. I need an offensive lineman who dominates at the bench press because I know he's capable of moving linemen. And let me start throwing out names, and you tell me where they played. Billy Turner, Lewis, where did he play in college?
Left tackle.
What did Dallas Thomas play in college?
Pretty sure that was left tackle.
What did Forrest Lamp play in college?
Was he a left tackle? I don't remember.
He played a lot of tackle. I was watching the highlights. They're showing me highlights of Forrest Lamp, and he's kicking out blocking defensive ends. And I'm thinking, I'm tired of guys that have quick feet and long arms that can block the ends, and you're putting them in there against 320-pound D tackles, and they just get trucked, and Tannehill gets killed, or a running back gets killed. I want a guy who can actually go in and move a D tackle. And I want a guy that is a guard. I don't want tackles that have to learn how to play guard anymore. And that's exactly what they did. They went and they got one of the best pure guards in the draft. And I'm really hoping that the coaches are over this and they can clean him up a little bit in his pass protection and clean him up a little bit on his technique. Because without a doubt, if he can get his hands on somebody, he's going to create some havoc in there on linemen. This guy is really strong. His combine numbers, I think he may have been the strongest guard in the draft. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, if you guys saw that, but he was definitely one of the top performers at putting the bench press up. So you're getting a guy who's already has that capability to move people around. And everything I read about him is he's kind of nasty in general. You know, I know we had the whole scandal with Richie Incognito, but we lost that when he got run out of town. You know, what happened to our nasty line that didn't let people, push him around? And we got that replaced with Dallas Thomas, who just, routinely got trucked over and over and over. And so I feel like one thing that's quietly going under the radar right now is Adam Gase has brought in Anthony Fasano. He's now brought in this guard. He spent a whole year teaching Laremy Tunsil how to run block even better than he knew. And we're going to have potentially, if Mike Pouncey is healthy, which I know is a huge if right now, seeing him use a cane and stuff like that. But if Mike Pouncey is healthy, Adam Gase is intending to power run the football this year with Jay Ajayi. Make no mistake, he's putting the pieces in place to be able to do that.
That gives me goosebumps.
I know, but that is the type of people he's collecting right now. And you got to give, as a coach, credit to Adam Gase because he's realized when you get into November, December, and into the playoffs, these teams that are consistently getting there and winning are able to run the football effectively in a power scheme. And so
even New England when they need to.
People don't realize that New England, when they realize a team struggles with the power run, they come in.
They'll jam it down your throat.
And they just power run blount at you until you stop it, and because it's easy. And so those teams need to be able to do that when it's snowing out or it's raining out and you're in those late cold games. You've got to be able to have a semblance of a running game, and that is exactly why we beat Pittsburgh. That's exactly why we beat Buffalo, because we were effectively running the football. And so I loved the pick. I thought it was a great move by him, and if they can get his technique coached up, I absolutely think he's going to be the starting guard on opening day.
All right. How about you, Duke? Isaac Asiata. Before you do, I want to make a quick note. Before you get started, Duke. It should be noted that Isaac Asiata actually is a couple of years older than your standard rookie because he spent some time, I believe it was doing the Mormon mission. So Isaac Asiata is already 24 years old, and by the time his rookie deal is done, he'll be 28 years old. So that's just something to note. I will enjoy him while he's here, but I don't know if he's going to stick around for too long. Go ahead, Duke. I want to hear. How about your thoughts on Asiata?
Well, much like Chad, this was, every fan speak mock that I did, every mock draft that I saw, everything had this guy going somewhere in the middle of the third round. And so when the third round ended, I was relieved he was still there. He was just one of those guys that I had a hunch on. Last year, I had a hunch on Jack Conklin, and he turned out to be all right. Of course, we got Tunsil. He was obviously a better prospect, but still, I thought, this Asiata guy, he's what Miami needs. Every little bit of film I saw on him, which wasn't a whole lot, but everything I saw, I was like, this guy's a bulldozer. He can pull, he attacks guys, and he's gonna throw some linebackers out of his way. And so the fourth round comes, and I'm sitting there just kind of watching. And then, Dorian Johnson was the guy that I kind of thought Miami might have interest in. He goes off the board, and I was like, oh crap, here goes this run on guard. And nothing happens. And then we get to the fifth round, and I'm just sitting there and like Chad, I was like, please get this guy. And Miami moved up. And of all the draft picks made in this draft, I actually did a fist pump when I read his name across the bottom of the screen. I was excited for this pick. This was my favorite pick of the draft. He's going to start, in my opinion, day one. So I don't think there's anybody there that's going to be better.
Well, Ted Larson's no slouch, so he's not going to have an automatic.
Perhaps, I don't know. I just think this guy's going to get in training camp, and he's going to bulldoze one of those defensive tackles, and they're going to be like, let's just get behind this guy and run. But, I just like the pick. I like, what was it? Chris Gear called him the nasty prick on the field. I love a demeanor like that. And, we needed a guard. As Chad mentioned, all those, even though Dallas Thomas did kick into the left guard, I think his senior year at Tennessee because of, what was that, Antonio Richardson. He started out at left tackle. So, and a lot of tackles come into the league, and I think Forrest Lamp's going to be a good guard. I mean, I think he'll be fine because, he put up like 30-some reps. So, this guy's strong. He's going to do things. But we need a guy that just knows that position, is not learning the position, and he knows what to do. He knows how to pull. He gets in there. I don't know. Just everything about it just screams greatness. Maybe I don't know, hyping this up a little too much, but and you mentioned Richie Incognito, and the first thing I thought was that whole situation doesn't happen under Adam Gase, and that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Yeah, I'm happy as a clam with the whole Asiata pick, and I should also mention. You know what? I forgot what I was going to mention. Ron, go ahead and save my butt, please.
All right, no problem. I was sitting there just paying attention to the draft, and I thought that the Dolphins for sure were going to take a couple of these fifth rounders and move up to get Asiata, and they ended up not having to move up very far to get him. Maybe it was the age, like you mentioned, Lewis, his age being a little bit older. That does count a lot for these teams. They don't want to a lot of times draft guys that are a little bit older because what you're talking about would be 28 at the end of his rookie year, and it's a little bit of a chance for some of these teams, but the Dolphins don't mind taking chances sometimes. And in the fifth round, I don't even consider it a chance. But if you really look at our roster too now, what everybody thought was such a weak position really has gotten, I feel super good about our guard position and who can play guard right now. Obviously you got Asiata, and then you've got Bushrod who can play guard, obviously. Urbic, Larson, Steen, all these guys can be guards. Some of these guys were starting, and they'll be sitting on the bench, to begin this season. Hopefully, all things go.
Yeah, and just to supplement that, Ryan, all those guys you just mentioned probably would have been the starting guards for the team 2 years ago. All of them.
Oh, exactly. So I think the guard position's gotten better. I mean, not to get off on it a little bit, but actually, I'm more concerned about tackle. Honestly, I think that yes, we've got our two starting tackles, but boy, after that, oof, I'm a little nervous. I'm hoping some people develop for sure, or we're looking at Sam Young as a starting tackle somewhere.
Well,
I mean, that's honestly what we're looking at.
Young didn't do as badly as we like to think he did. He was actually not that bad, all things
But
considered.
But this definitely kind of rounded off the guard position. I don't imagine that they're really, now that I really looked at it, I don't think they're going to go out and really look for any more guard help whatsoever. Maybe they will tackle because they got still a couple spots left. I think they'll still look to really evaluate that position. But I think this kind of summed up guard for us. It capped it off. And I'm interested to see what that position looks like once we get into camp.
And before we move on from Asiata, I actually remember what it was I was going to say. First of all, again, important to note, Asiata can play center if something happens to Pouncey, which history states something will, but hopefully that does not turn out to be the case. Hopefully Pouncey does get back to form, because at this point you never know. The miracles of modern medicine these days, guys, for real. Like, you see guys coming back from ACLs and coming back better than ever. So you just can never know anymore.
Quickly, I just wanted to say that Urbic, Larson, Steen, Pouncey, and Brindle are all listed as center or center/guard on this team. 5 guys plus Asiata. I mean, that's just an interesting point. They are loading up on guys that can also play center right now. I mean, the interior of the line is not going to be an issue with this team, I don't think, for starter or depth at all. As long as the outside tackles stay healthy, the line should be mean and nasty, and we should see one of the better lines that we've seen in a while. Hopefully, I just hope that we can stay healthy in the tackle position.
Yeah, and the other thing that I wanted to mention was, as long as we're talking about the trade up, which was the one cardinal sin that if Tannenbaum ever did, everybody would grab the torches and pitchforks and run him out of town. He actually managed to move up without giving up the actual number of picks. So bravo to Mike Tannenbaum and Chris Greer for managing to move up in the draft without actually giving up an extra pick. They just moved back a few picks. That's all they did. So
yeah, it was, by the way, it was Eagles. So I was making that point.
Yeah, the Eagles again. The Eagles again. We seem to trade with the Eagles a lot.
But it's a huge thing because, one, is they're an NFC team, and so it's hard to work out trades for people in your conference. Your division is extremely difficult. But when you have an NFC team, you got to give Tannenbaum credit, because this is always a struggle for teams in the NFL to work out trades. Nobody wants to make trades. And I'll tell you, one of the stupidest personnel things I've ever seen involved Jeff Fisher, because they did the trade with the Redskins for RG3, and the Rams got all those picks. I don't know if you guys remember this game, but a year or two ago, the Rams played the Redskins, and he marched out intentionally like all the players he got from that trade with the Rams out for the coin flip to basically smear it in the Redskins' face that I've got these studs and RG3 is not even on your team anymore. And I thought, that's so stupid, because that is doing nothing but making the Redskins not want to trade with you again, because look what you're doing, a few years later after the trade. What Tannenbaum has done a real good job is he's developing a rapport with the Eagles. That trade was almost nominal. Like, the Eagles got maybe they moved up 10 positions in the next round, and we flopped picks. But that trade was very important to the Dolphins because they needed him as the guard. They needed to make sure they got him, and so the Eagles just did the trade. You may very well see next year the flip side. Maybe Miami, there's going to be a player the Eagles desperately want, and they don't want to make a huge trade on the value chart. Maybe Miami just works out deals like, yeah, we'll flop with you. Give us a little bit of value. You can go ahead and take them, because there's not somebody here that we desperately need to take right now. And it's like you're developing the actual ability to have a trading partner that's fine, because the Eagles are in the NFC. So the amount of time you face the Eagles, if you're helping them out, is minimal. And you know what? If you're meeting them in the Super Bowl, great for both of you. So I just want to take that off for Tannenbaum, because I think so many people get critical of him. And I really appreciate we have a GM that works out trades.
So it's kind of I guess it's kind of like NASCAR, huh, Duke? We have an ally in the Eagles on the racetrack.
Well, when you're, we watch Daytona with your plate race, you've got to have guys you can work with. You can't just go out there and you can't just go out there and just, as they say, beat and bang off each other and expect them to come back and help you when you need them. need to get help. So, yeah, I mean, and you guys think this is a fairly tight-knit kind of community. You're not talking about, guys sitting there playing Madden on a headphone, somewhere, and one guy's way off, and that's the only time you're interacting. I mean, these guys see each other in owners' meetings. They've probably worked together before, possibly for other organizations. I mean, so these guys know each other. So if you try to, if you try to swindle them or pull one over them or do something that they're not going to like, I mean, it's going to not just affect your rapport with that team, but it's going to affect your rapport with all the teams. Because then they know, all right, you're going to treat us, if you treated that team that way, you're going to treat us that way, and they won't work with you. So you've got to, you can't be out there trying to, you want to win the deal, but at the same time, you're going to have to give a little bit. And so when stuff like the San Francisco-Chicago trade went down, and you're like, what exactly? I mean, Chicago obviously was okay with doing all that, which is what's surprising. So
John Lynch looks like a genius. I'll say that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think Chad's right. You've got to work with these guys, not just this year, but the next year. And you can't, I mean, obviously you're competitors, but you're also you know each other. It's a kind of a little fraternity, dude. You can't just go out and try to take advantage of it, unless you're Bill Belichick. Maybe let him get away with it. I don't understand.
Yeah, they let him get away with anything. All right, so let's go ahead and we're gonna move into the next round. Let's see, Devon Godchaw. Okay, quick question: did anybody have Godchaw on their board, like, at all? Because I had no idea who this guy was. None. Defensive tackle out of LSU. He had a rough life. He watched his brother get shot right in front of his eyes, so of course that was something awful that had to happen to him. But
yeah,
he's got that LSU attitude. We've seen a lot of those guys like Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry. A lot of these guys that come out of LSU are like filled with attitude and competitiveness in the right way. So I'll take volunteers for this one. Does anybody want to talk about Godchaw?
I can talk a little bit. I don't know him specifically, Lewis. I absolutely didn't have him on my radar as I was watching the draft. I did some research on him after the draft, and he's got some potential, but I'm going to throw a name out there you guys probably won't like, but this is how it feels, and it reminds me. You guys remember probably about 4 years ago, we drafted Anthony Johnson, the defensive tackle from LSU.
I remember.
Yes.
Name. Very
same.
No, wait. No, wasn't he? Wait, wasn't he undrafted?
I
I think he was.
Oh, wait, so we brought him in. Excuse me if he wasn't drafted. So he had that feel, though, where it was like he had some talent, and a lot of people felt like he was going to be a guy that could get in there with the rotations, and he never quite made it in there. And so just touching on kind of the both of the defensive tackles that were taken, that's a glaring weakness we had. That right now we only have Ndamukong Suh and Jordan Phillips as starting D tackles, and then nothing. We let Earl Mitchell go. And so we've picked these two guys up, and I'm not buying the Kool-Aid that these two D tackles are going to be functional third or fourth rotating guys in there. I see the potential. I like the value where they're at. They're both gap penetrating tackles. Both of them are, and that's pretty much what Ndamukong Suh and Jordan Phillips is. So I'm a little concerned because who is the guy we have right now that when you need to, you can go in and occupy space, that you can take up the center and the guard every time, that big anchor defensive lineman. These guys are kind of all the same thing that I'm seeing here right now. And so I've been openly politicking on Twitter. I think the Dolphins absolutely need to get a veteran D-tackle in here. Obviously, because I know them, I'm just like, why are we talking to Paul Stoliai? Why aren't we talking even to Jared Odrick?
I think Stoliai is washed, Chad.
Well, he may be, but we don't need a guy to come in here to be our starting D-tackle. We need a guy that can come in and give us 15, maybe 20 good snaps a game. That's all we need. But they've got to be good snaps. And so I'm very concerned that we've got these two late-round tackles who are both gap penetrating tackles that we are going to get Ndamukong Suh tired or worse hurt, or Jordan Phillips is going to get tired or hurt, and we're going to have a massive drop off in the middle of our defense. And so that's my number one concern for the team right now is who is our third and fourth defensive tackles? Are these draft picks really up for that challenge, or who's going to do it?
Duke, any insight on Godshaw at all that you can offer?
Nothing other than what Chad said. I'm in agreement. We need the block-absorbing, space-eating guy. But obviously the Dolphins don't care about that.
That could be why they invested so heavily in run-stopping linebackers.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I had to say, it would be a scheme thing that they want their defensive tackles to get up the field, hit these gaps, and let the linebackers fill the gaps behind them. That may be part of the wide nine or whatever it is that they're doing. Personally, I was hoping they would go for actually when they traded back with Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay got the guy I really wanted to get was that I'm just going to call him Stevie T from USC, who is like this behemoth nose tackle. And that's who you need. You need that kind of guy who's going to go in there, because Suh at his best is a gap penetrating 3-tech defensive tackle. If you've got a guy on the other side that can absorb 2 blocks and let Suh go one-on-one, Suh is going to win 9 times out of 10. I don't want your $60 million guaranteed money defensive tackle being the guy having to take on double teams. So my underachieving second-round pick or these late-round guys become the guys that have to win one-on-one matchups. It's just backwards to me. And so, but they know what they're doing more than I do. But I'm with Chad. I'd like to see them get the other type of tackle.
Ron, Devon Godshaw?
I don't really know anything specifically about him, but I will say now that the draft is over on defense, no position makes me more nervous than defensive tackle, honestly. I mean, beyond, it's just to go with what Chad said, beyond Suh and Phillips, who I'll be honest with you, I just don't trust Phillips yet. I mean, there's just a bunch of question marks beyond question marks behind. I almost feel like Chad, they're gonna have to go. They're gonna have to find somebody that they trust more to rotate in on these guys. I mean, you can't with the tackle position especially. You can't just run these tackles in. They're not offensive linemen. You can't run them every snap all day. You are going to get so gutted up the middle. Unless you're planning on playing a lot of like 3-4 and putting in more defensive end, more linebackers, what have you.
Oh, they can't run it. You can't play a 3-4 without an anchoring defensive guy in the middle, a nose tackle. I mean,
that's
just they don't have a nose tackle right now.
Yeah, they don't even have a guy to do that, as you say. So I don't know what their plan is there. But like I said, I'm not even sure I completely trust Phillips yet. I mean, that's obviously a debatable point. I know that's kind of a 50-50 with Dolphins fans. But I mean, behind them anyway, let's just pretend they're starters. I mean, you just can't run these guys every snap. There's no way. By the middle of the third quarter, you're going to see teams running up the gut on us so much if you try and do that. I feel like they have to go get somebody.
Here's usually a statistic is, and I would say this is even worse in Miami because you're playing in such intense heat and humidity, and they're big guys. But most defensive tackles aren't much good for many more than 30 to 40 snaps a game. If you're expecting top quality performance out of them. Now, a guy like Ndamukong Suh can give you like 50, but he's in exceptional shape for a defensive tackle. He's in much, much better shape than Jordan Phillips is. You just have to look at the two guys. And so it's very concerning to me because I don't see Jordan Phillips giving the Dolphins more than maybe 30 snaps a game where he's going to be at a high level. After that happens, he is going to begin the process of getting worn down. And so you've got to be able to rotate your tackles. And that is the good news for the Dolphins is I think you can bring in a guy who's, in his early 30s at a defensive tackle that can't sustain that number of snaps, but you can still rotate them in. And if he can give you even 15 quality snaps, that kind of is a stopgap, literally, for you. But this, as you go on through this offseason, Miami, they made their guys, they pursued their guys. I'm very happy that they didn't pay Zach Brown. I know there were a lot of people on Twitter and a lot of fans that were unhappy the Dolphins didn't get the deal done. But you know what? They got into the draft and they got McMillan. On the flip side, me being one of them, I'm kind of wishing right now they had paid Poe because he wanted to come here and they just couldn't come to terms on a contract. But I would feel so much better right now if we were talking about Poe, Sue, and Phillips right now as our defensive tackle rotation. So it's going to be interesting. I do want to throw one question out for you guys because it's obviously an option. It would be very difficult to pull off, but what would you give up for Sheldon Richardson from the Jets? They're clearly shopping him right now.
We have 3 extra 7th rounders nobody's using.
I just want to hear from the panel what they would give up for him, or would they even pursue him from the Jets?
Well, what I would give up is not what the Jets would take. I wouldn't have a problem. I'm going to assume that a long-term deal is put into place at a reasonable price. Sheldon Richardson comes with some baggage, so I think you can get him at a reasonable deal. You don't want to sign an $8-10 million a year deal. Forget that. But assuming all of that, I'd be willing to offer a 3rd or 4th rounder for him.
I absolutely would too. I do know he's. I will say very confidently he is going to be off the Jets. They want him gone. They don't have. They have the personnel at D tackle, and so the problem is that the Jets aren't going to want to give him to the Dolphins because it makes it that much harder for the Jets to win the division. So I don't know if it's possible, but that to me is he is an elite, capable defensive tackle. I don't know many other places they can go get one right now at this point in the offseason.
I'll be honest with you. The list of defensive tackles still available right now that could come in and do what you're looking for him to do, Chad, which is maybe 20 snaps probably. That list is actually still fairly deep at the second tier free agent level.
That's a good thing. So that I expect them to go get them. Yeah, name me your top 2 or 3 if you have a list.
Okay, I'll go for it. We got you got Vance Walker, which he's more of a defensive tackle, defensive end. Glenn Dorsey's still out there. Tony McDaniel is still a possibility.
Oh, there's a guy.
Kedrick Golston, Paul Soliai, Tyson Jackson. I mean, there's some guys out there that could come in. They're all like about 30 years old. Like just breaking 30 or just over 30. That could come in and they may be working on that right now. You never know. I almost feel like the Dolphins are pretty smart now, especially under Gase. And I know they know when they see glaring weaknesses and they see glaring opportunities on their team. I feel like there's no way they don't know this, and they're probably working on something or thinking about that move as we speak. So I'm not going to worry until I see the roster show up to training camp. Now we show up to training camp with this group, I'm going to be nervous.
Hey, Ron.
Yes.
Are you ready to give Mike Tannenbaum his credit?
I will give him his credit for now. Let's see how these draft picks turn out.
You're not going to give it up.
I'm not. I believe in Tannenbaum that he's a dealer, a shaker. I love his free agent moves. I love his trades. I love his cap management. Except for at the end of the Jets, but maybe he didn't care anymore. But I love all that. I still don't know if I believe in him that he can truly, pick talent as far as rookie talent goes from the draft. But I know Greer and Gase have a lot to say about it too in these draft picks. I don't think it's all Tannenbaum. So, but I'll give him the credit so far for what he's done. And I will say that this draft, we got some needs. That's for sure. We hopefully filled some needs.
I'm going to keep needling you about this.
I want to say that I think that we go into training camp with what we have. I think these guys that you mentioned that are out in the market, they will stay there unless there's just a team that just is completely devoid of anybody on the defensive line. I think Miami is going to give the rookies every shot to either prove that they are capable of starting alongside Sue or being a quality backup and working that rotation before they make any before they make any moves. So if they don't, and at this point they shouldn't really be expected to as 5th and 6th round picks, they're at best depth. But if they can't show that they can hold up and be that depth, then I could see about sometime first week of August, then going out and picking up a guy, one of those guys you mentioned, to come in and say, all right, you're a veteran guy, you know what you're doing, you're going to play 20 snaps a game, here's your small deal, very little guaranteed money, do what you do. I think they'll wait until then, but I kind of agree with you. I think that there will be a move made there. But I'm hoping the rookies can, improve me along there.
All right, so we spent a lot of time on Devon Godshaw and the defensive tackle position as a whole. Now, obviously, the next pick, they doubled down and they picked Vincent Taylor, defensive tackle out of Oklahoma State. So we've already talked about the defensive tackle position in general. Does anybody have some specific insight on Taylor?
I looked at some film on him, Lewis, and he reminds me a lot more of Jordan Phillips on his body type and movement. He's a guy that looks like he's not in the greatest of shape. I'm just going to assume he's not he may need a little bit of motivation.
For what it's worth, Chad, Jordan Phillips actually has 30 pounds on the guy.
Oh, really? That surprises me. But so that's probably not a good thing. But watching him watching his game film, he absolutely, his strength was getting through the gaps and making tackles in the backfield. If that's true, Lewis, I have to be really concerned he's going to get moved around too easily if he's that light. So we'll see.
Duke, Vincent Taylor.
From what I've read on him, he's more, all the guys we have are the one gap penetrating guys. But I think if you had to put all 4 of them down right now based on position, Sue and Phillips would be. Sue is your starting 3-tech. Godshaw is your backup 3-tech. Phillips would be your starting 0 or 1-tech, and Taylor would be your other. He would be the backup 0 or 1-tech. So I think that's where he fits in. He's basically, I think Godshaw's there to develop behind Sue and kind of be his understudy, perhaps, and Taylor is more there to back up Phillips.
Ron, do you have anything on Isaiah Taylor? Because if I recall, there were a lot of people that were actually more high on Taylor than they were on Godshaw.
Yeah, I don't have anything specifically on Taylor.
All right, well, we can move on then. Last one. Whew, it's been a long show. We're almost done, guys.
Well, before you get to that, I did read on Pro Football Focus's big board. I believe they had Vincent Taylor as the 65th or something prospect, so they were very high on him.
Well, Pro Football Focus is Pro Football Focus, so
I don't know. I mean,
grain of salt.
Somebody out there thinks he was good enough to be. To be graded that high. So
I understand that, Duke, but it's like these are also the same people who at one point had Dallas Thomas as the highest rated offensive lineman in football. So
that was just preseason, though.
It doesn't count. It doesn't matter, man. Dallas Thomas doesn't belong at the top of any list except the worst.
Until the purge, which was the best thing that's ever happened to this team.
I learned my lesson with preseason because in 2013 I watched Jonathan Martin play left tackle in preseason, and he was good. I mean, he held his own. And he's not playing anybody important, not playing anybody special, but he held his own. And I thought we might be all right there. And then week 1 happened, and I was like, "Wow, that was just completely different." And I mean, it's understandable if you're playing quarterback or some other position where you're just playing basic stuff. This is offensive line. You're blocking the guy in front of you. He's not doing some, basic move in preseason, and then now they're coming with these exotic moves. He's just rushing the passer. It's stuff he does. So why he went from decent looking in preseason to complete bum after that is beyond me. But so I don't care what happens in preseason anymore. I just like to watch it because it's the Dolphins.
All right. Well, last one, guys. We're almost done. And ironically enough, Miami, again, like Duke mentioned really early in the show, the Dolphins were actually the last team in the whole draft to pick an offensive player, and that one player was wide receiver out of Virginia Tech, Isaiah Ford, a wide receiver, guys, and that alone shocked me. So I guess that really was a BPA situation, because if you think about it, you already have, of course, the top three: Kenny Stills, Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker. You have Leonte Carew, who they traded up for, and people are still waiting for the return on that. Maybe they'll never get it. I don't know. Even if Carew becomes AJ Green for some reason, they still won't be happy about the trade. Jakeem Grant, who is underachieving. I still like the guy, though. I really hope he does well. And, of course, Rashawn Scott, an undrafted free agent who came on strong and actually overcame Carew last season at one point. So now you add Isaiah Ford to that list, and the wide receiver core is really crowded now. And people had Isaiah Ford as a potential third or fourth rounder. He did run a 4.61 at the combine, which is definitely not good for wide receivers, but he is projected to be a slot guy, so something along the lines of a Jarvis Landry role. He's got some talent to him, so now it's really becoming a competition at wide receiver. So we'll call it a night with this. But Isaiah Ford, guys, anybody want to go first on that, or should we just pick?
I watched the film on him, Melissa, and he looks pretty good on film. For a guy that's in the 7th round, he doesn't look bad. I guess right now I feel like he's Matt Hazel 2.0. I liked how Matt Hazel looked on film too, but they're just the receiving core on our team is so talented. There's just not really a spot for him. I think for this guy to stick around with Miami, he'll either have to be on the practice squad or have some injuries occur.
Or beat someone out, Chad. Gase doesn't care where you were drafted.
He'd have to win the 5th wide receiver spot, and I just don't see him beating out Jakeem Grant unless he's got some returns, because I know. But Jakeem Grant is absolutely a weapon in the kick return game. He would be in the punt return game if you could trust him, but you can't. But he absolutely, when you put Jakeem Grant and Kenyon Drake back, it allows teams not to be able to kick away from your dangerous returner. They're both very dangerous. So this guy would have to really be impressive for me to not have Jakeem Grant have that roster spot as my kick returner. And so I look for him to probably be on the practice squad. I don't believe he's going to be able to compete with Carew. I absolutely think Carew is Jarvis Landry's backup. That's good. His role is he would be a nice big physical receiver you could put in the slot, but you have Jarvis Landry. So, you can't take him off the field. But it'll be interesting to watch the guy in camp, and I'm hopeful he can get on the practice squad and be available. You just never know if Kenny Stills is going to go down with an injury or Devontae Parker is going to go down with an injury, and you suddenly need him to be your 4th guy in there. So that would be my thoughts.
Ron, I know that you got to head out of here soon, so I'll let you get this one in. Isaiah Ford?
I don't know anything about him specifically except to say that when you have a strength at a position like the Dolphins do at wide receiver, it's all you need to do at that point then is you just add nice young talent to see what can happen. I mean, not to mention after they did that, they also, out of the 14 undrafted free agents they got, 4 of them were wide receivers.
Yeah, that was weird. I don't understand what Gase is looking for.
It wasn't, because normally the Dolphins will go into camp with 11 or 12, and even adding those 4 and drafting Isaiah Ford, that has still only put them at 11. So they needed it just for numbers. Just numbers alone for camp. It was necessary to do that. And they're able to do that when you have a receiving core like they have, and you feel as comfortable about that room as you do, and you have the leadership in Landry that you do, and the talent in some of these guys. And again, I will say, if Devontae Parker could put in an offseason like he's needed to put in, man, that would be such an added bonus to this team, into that unit. That could be one of the best wide receiver units in the NFL if that happens. But I mean, we'll just see. But they were able to just add young talent. That was definitely a best player available situation, and we'll see where it goes from there. It is going to be tough for him to make the team for sure, which is a good thing for the Dolphins.
And finally, we'll close it up. Duke, Isaiah Ford, anything?
I was hoping they would pick another offensive lineman, actually.
Well, I can understand that, because I mean, again, the whole idea of adding another wide receiver is crazy. I would have actually, preferred another offensive lineman just in case something happens with Asiata. God forbid, because I think the reason he dropped as far as he did, not just age, I think he has a knee injury that he needs to take care of. It's not severe, but it is a something. So,
I do want to just add to that. I mean, I'm not high on Carew at all. I mean, the guy wasn't even active a lot of the time towards the end of the year last year. I mean, that does not say
remember,
much.
yeah, exactly. Remember,
For a
Rashawn
guy
Scott
that
beat him.
Yes, that he beat him out, and I mean, we traded two picks away for that guy to draft up to go up last year and get him. I mean, we gave up a lot for him, and the guy wasn't even active. I really
I never understood it either. And I will say that Carew, he just is not fast enough to replace a Kenny Stills or Devontae Parker in the offensive scheme. The only player he can replace is Jarvis Landry, and Jarvis Landry is like probably the top 2 or 3 at worst slot receivers in the NFL. He's that good, and so I don't understand why they wanted him so bad, because they didn't have any kind of a need for him. And you're not probably going to see Carew play this year, because I just don't think he has the speed to be an outside receiver or to be able to do what Kenny Stills and Devontae Parker can. And I don't know. I mean, it definitely is not encouraging. He wasn't even getting to dress last year. He was being the 5th wide receiver. So hopefully he'll step up. He does have very good hands. He's a tough guy, Carew. I mean, he's not like he's terrible, but I don't see his path to getting into the starting lineup.
Well, I guess we'll see what happens in that regard. I don't get the Isaiah Ford pick at all, but it is what it is. This was a long show, guys, but I'm glad we did it. We're not going to go into the undrafted free agents because, oh my God, that would be a whole other show in and of itself. There's just too many of them. So, and not to mention, they're actually probably still out there looking for more undrafted guys. They brought in a punter for competition for Matt Darr. What do you think about that instead of a kicker? I would think it was the kicker we needed competition for, not Matt Darr.
Not after that Buffalo game. Franks has got that, man.
Yeah. How do you even question Franks after he hit the best kick in the last decade?
That guy was like my hero.
Oh God!
After he made that kick, I love him forever.
Tell me you were not shaking in your boots when he lined up to make that kick.
I'd have bet everything I own that he was going to make that kick. I'd have bet my house that he wasn't going to make that kick.
Yeah,
I just couldn't believe he made it. I mean, in Rush too. It was one of the shining moments of last year. So one of those things that just sticks into my head.
I could watch the look on Rex's face over and over when he didn't get the timeout call. The time he hit that kick. I mean, he didn't get the timeout call and he hit it. That was, but
oh my God!
You know, hey, one thing as you're leaving, guys, the Dolphins, I believe, as of today, have 88 guys under. So they're whether it's going to be a veteran D tackle or a kicker or what, but they are going to make 2 more moves yet. So obviously they got something planned.
They're going to get a tackle and a defensive tackle. That's just my guess.
All right. Well, I guess that'll be it. Thank you all so much for joining us. It was a really long show, but it'll be up very soon on SoundCloud, iTunes, and of course our Stitcher account. So, and of course, if you want to rewatch it here on YouTube with the awesome graphic by Efren Ramos, thank you so much for that, Efren. You're awesome. You can follow him on Twitter at Efren Ramos. That's EFRAINRAMOS. Very simple, very clear cut. That's his name. Go look him up. He's got awesome graphics, and he's got a lot of good insight on Dolphins football and, of course, some Celtics basketball. So that's going to be it. Thank you all so much for joining us. And for myself, Chad Ronenbaum, Chris Duke Early, and, of course, Ron Caniff, we will say good night, and thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you again next time.